Hi, my name's Chris Kilmer, and this is my testimony that God loves us more than we could ever imagine, and that He has a rescue plan for us. And that plan is His Son, Jesus Christ. So let me get started. In the mid-2000s, I was in my mid-20s, and one day I was driving through Bastrop, Texas. I really didn't have a whole lot on my mind. I was just thinking about my plans for the weekend when all of a sudden, this bright light just rushed into my mind. And I guess the best way I could illustrate it for you is, let's pretend that this pen is me and I'm just driving along, thinking about whatever, when all of a sudden this light enters my mind that has intellect, a personality, and it's so immense that my mind can barely handle it, much less comprehend it. The funny thing is that I immediately knew it was God. There was no question in my mind. I never thought, oh, what's happening to me? Oh, this is so strange. No, it's God. I just knew. And a funny thing too is that I had always imagined that the first time that I met God, it would be like meeting royalty. I'd be doing a lot of bowing and groveling, and there'd be a lot of distance between us. It was nothing like that at all. I surprised the heck out of myself by demanding loudly at my car ceiling, "Where have you been? Where have you been?" It was as though He was this family member who I hadn't seen in years and actually forgotten about. And then all of a sudden, one day, He just walks through my front door with a big smile on His face. And I am just shocked and excited to see Him. But that's the thing, it wasn't like that. It was that. He was a beloved family member that I had somehow forgotten about. And yet somewhere deep inside, I had never stopped searching for Him. And here's another thing. God's presence felt more like home than anything I have ever experienced in my entire life. It had made life up to that point feel fleeting and insubstantial, kind of like a mist or a dream. I guess another way to put it is to say life up to that point felt as solid as paper mache, whereas that moment with Him was a rock. Also, I was given the distinct impression that my life, as compared to my overall existence with Him, was a lot like a tiny dark smudge on an expansive sea of white light. And this really helped for me to realize that the difficulties of my life weren't actually that daunting. Up to that point, they had felt like mountains just crowding in on me, making me claustrophobic and stressed out and worried all the time. But once He made me see my existence from that perspective, all of a sudden these mountains seemed like tiny little hills that I was just going to step over and then continue my walk with Him for the rest of my existence in this expansive sea of white light. Here's the other thing. God emanated this intense pride and love for me. And it had nothing to do with anything I had done. Trust me, if you had known my life up to that point, you would know it wouldn't have had anything to do with what I had done. Instead, it had everything to do with the fact that He had made me. And, I didn't really quite understand this sensation that I was feeling, what He was sending my way, until many years later when I had my own two daughters. And I found myself many times at night rocking them in my arms, walking around the living room, and just staring at their faces. And as I'm staring at them, I would have this overflowing love for them, which had nothing to do with anything that they were doing, because they were literally sleeping, and everything to do with the fact that I had made them and that they were mine. And that's when that moment from all those years ago in Bastrop finally clicked for me. What God was emanating was an unconditional love of a parent. Now, after a few minutes, God's presence faded away. And, while I knew it would, I somehow knew it would, it was still very upsetting because he didn't say anything. Why make this spectacular entrance into my life completely change how I view everything and then simply fade away without saying anything? It took many years for me to figure it out, but I finally did. You see, it's one thing for somebody to tell you that they love you. It's a completely different thing for them to show you that they love you, like he did for me. And also, his message was perfectly clear and undeniable. I am here, and I love you more than you will ever know. And now I know this is exactly how he feels about all of us. Now, it'd be great if that's where the story ended, but unfortunately, it didn't end there. You see, somewhere deep down inside, I knew that I was being given a choice to either continue following my own path or to follow God's. And that meant giving over my will to him. And I just didn't want to do that. It was great what I had experienced. It meant so much to me, but I liked making my own decisions. And I was still chasing girls, and honestly, I had a deep and abiding love for alcohol. I sincerely believed at the time that alcohol made good days great and bad days better. And I wasn't ready to give it up. So that's what I did. I said, thanks God, I love you so much, but I'm going to keep doing my own thing, but I will come back to you someday. Well, over the next 10 or so years, I began to have two recurring nightmares. And in the first nightmare, I would be in a dimly lit room. Sometimes it would be a church, other times it would be a mansion. That really didn't matter. What mattered was I knew with every fiber of my being that I was never getting out. And I'd try to fool myself. I'd say, okay, Chris, pray to God, sing worship songs, and I'm sure he'll come down and get you out. But he never did. Because I knew once I was in that place, I was there to stay. And in the second nightmare, I would be given a revelation that the world had lost something infinitely precious. And this would break my heart. My heart would feel as though it had been torn in two with despair. And I would run around and I would try to tell everybody, try to tell them, don't you understand what we've lost? But to be honest, it didn't really matter because we'd already lost it and we were never getting it back. So usually the nightmare would end with me just curled up in the fetal position, completely hopeless. And I would wake up like that. I would wake up feeling so hopeless and depressed that I didn't feel like I could lift a finger. Have you ever felt that way where you're so depressed you don't think you can move a muscle? Well, that's how I would wake up from this dream. Also during this 10 plus year period, I had another experience. There were several times where I would be awoken at night by 3 sharp, authoritative knocks on a wood door. And there were some odd things about this. First of all, it didn't matter if I was living in a house with a wood door or an apartment with a metal door at the time. It would always be 3 knocks on a wood door. Also, the knocks, as weird as this sounds, the knocks were authoritative, like someone with true and real power. Like a constable on the other side of my door, knocking, asking to be let in, but to know they have the authority to get in there if they want to. And then finally, when I would wake up from this knock, my eyes would fly open and I would feel as though I was a bell that had been rung 3 times. Each knock would resonate through my entire being. And I know that sounds weird, but that's how I would feel. So I'd get out of bed, I'd go check the front door, and of course there was never anybody there. So in 2018, I was 37 years old. I had 2 daughters and a wife, and I decided, it's been 10 plus years since that experience. in Bastrop, it is time for me to crack open a Bible and finally read this thing. And so I did. I started listening to this podcast called the 10-Week Bible Study Podcast. And the podcast made me realize that the Bible was nothing like I'd always assumed it was. I assumed it was this dusty old book with all these rules that I had to follow, that if I listened to it, it would completely restrict my life. And more importantly, that it was thousands of years old. You know, how could it possibly apply to modern day? And this podcast made me realize that wasn't the case at all. The Bible was God's rescue plan for us that he's been carrying out for thousands of years, and it's still being carried out today. And that plan all revolves around his son, Jesus Christ. Well, this realization made me connect the God that I had met all those years ago in Bastrop to this Bible that I had been neglecting for so long. And that finally made me take that step in my walk with God, where I said in the summer of 2018, I told him, please do whatever you have to do in my life to take away my love for alcohol. Well, during that same summer, I had begun to have shortness of breath. When I would climb upstairs or I'd go do cardio, I would find it very hard to catch my breath. And I assumed it just, no big deal. It has to do with the fact that I was carrying around some water weight at the time. But then one Sunday at church, my wife and I are sitting in, listening to the sermon for the day, and all of a sudden, I feel like I have a vice-like grip around my lungs. I can barely force enough air into my lungs to get me by, to get to the next breath that I have to take. And this terrified me so much that I got up, walked out of the sermon, and immediately left a voice message for my doctor saying, hey, we've got to meet. And then, of course, I did what everybody did. I started Googling what my problem might be, which only scared me more. Well, my doctor got me in pretty quickly, and he took some blood tests. And then on July 16th, 2018, he told me that the blood test showed that I had an inflamed liver, kidney stones, and a high risk of heart disease with bad cholesterol. My wife and I were stunned. You see, at the time, I had been working out. I had been lifting weights at least 3 times a week, cycling 4 days a week. And if you asked my wife, she would tell you I was a health nut when it came to food. So we weren't prepared for this at all. And the first thing the doctor told me I should do is I needed to cut out alcohol for a month because of the inflamed liver. And that was the first time in years that I went for more than a week without alcohol. In fact, I went a month. The doctor then told me that he said I needed to start a ketogenic diet in order to lower my bad cholesterol. He said it was either that or take medicine for the rest of my life. So I decided to try it. And the craziest thing happened. Within only a few short weeks of starting the ketogenic diet, I could not achieve a buzz from alcohol, no matter how much alcohol I drank. And believe me when I say, it's kind of embarrassing, I tried. I really tried. I tried wine, I tried whiskey, I tried beer. Yes, I told God, take this desire away from me, but it wasn't gone yet. And nothing worked. I couldn't get the smallest buzz. All I got was a terrible hangover. And slowly but surely over time, all these fond memories I had of drinking alcohol that prompted me to continue drinking were replaced with the thought, what's the point? So in January of 2019, I decided to finally take the plunge. And I asked God to replace all of my worldly desires with a burning passion to become closer to Him, to learn His Word, and to carry out His will. And I also asked that He would help me to build a relationship with His Son, Jesus. You see, up to that point, before I had started reading the Bible, I had always imagined Jesus as this guy that's somehow related to God and who sacrificed himself on the cross, which cleansed me of my sins. And I really appreciated it. That was great that He'd done it, but I'd never even attempted to have a real relationship with him. I always talked to God. I had never talked to Jesus. And I wanted to change that because the Bible was showing me, he's my rescue plan. I need to have a relationship with him. And guys, what happened next just shocked me. Within a few short days of that prayer, all of my worldly desires, they just plummeted. What little lingering desire I had for alcohol left just went away. Alcohol became like water to me. There was no desire. Also, all the TV shows that I used to binge watch, they became completely unimportant to me. They became irrelevant to me. But God didn't stop there. He put this incredible hunger inside me to spend the day talking with him, talking with his son, reading scripture, worship, having quiet time with him. I tell you, guys, it got to the point where I thought if I said the name Jesus one more time to my wife, she'd slap me because she was so tired of hearing about it. And she's a Christian. She believes. God also very much put life into perspective for me. In the past, my sister and my brother-in-law had done things that had made my life a lot harder than they needed to be. And as hard as I tried to forgive them, I just couldn't. I couldn't get this resentment off my heart. But God made me realize, and his word in the Bible made me realize, that the stakes for each and every one of us is nothing short of an eternity in either heaven or hell. There is no in between. And one day, we will all end up in one of these places and stay there forever. And in that stark reality, this whole world, all of us, we are brothers and sisters that should be doing nothing but trying to help lead each other to Jesus, the bridge that will get us home, get us back to heaven. Everything else is unimportant. And in light of that, all of a sudden I didn't care about what my sister and brother-in-law had done to me. In fact, I've started a Bible study with my sister and her daughter. And last week I told my wife that I actually wanted to start spending more time with my brother-in-law, her brother. And the look on her face was priceless, both shocked and excited. I don't think she ever thought I would say that to her. And I gotta say, guys, now my life feels so new and clean. And that's the funny thing. I never knew it was dirty. It's kind of like when you drive your car around for several months and you don't get it washed, you don't really notice all the grime building up until you take it to the car wash. And when it comes out all nice and clean, you're kind of shocked at the difference. That's how it feels. Also, I find myself excited about the day when I wake up in the morning because I don't know what God's going to do today. And that's saying a lot, guys, because I'm almost 40. I've got back issues. I've got bills to pay. I've got a job. I've got kids I've got to feed. I've got all the normal worries of life. And yet I am excited about what's going to happen today. Also, I have this amazing sense of joy. No matter how my day's going, I could be sick. I could have had a hard day at work where I'm bone tired when I come home. And yet I still find myself, dancing in the kitchen with my girls at night. It doesn't matter what's going on. I just can't stop smiling. Also, the burdens of my life, they haven't changed. I have the same problems I've always had, and yet they feel lighter, as though someone has taken this huge weight off my shoulders. I go through the same motions every day. I go to work. I deal with the same problems, but everything seems lighter and easier. After about a month after this huge transformation in my life, which changed everything, I began to find Bible scripture which explained everything I had experienced up to that point. And so I'm going to read it real quick to just show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so In Matthew 22:13 through 14, it says, "Then the king said to his aides, 'Bind his hands and feet and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" See, those nightmares that I've been having, those were warnings that my time for being rescued was running out. And one day I might find myself with no longer the chance to be rescued. I'd find myself in that outer darkness, outside God's kingdom, where there would be much weeping and gnashing of teeth, or in another way of putting that, eternal regret for missing my opportunity. Revelations 3:20 says, Jesus says, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." See, that knock at night, that was Jesus asking me to let him into my life. And that for me confirmed that the godly presence I'd been feeling all those years before in Bastrop, that was the God of the Bible. That was the Father of Jesus. Okay. 1 John 5:14 through 15 says, "And we are confident that he hears us whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. And since we know he hears us when we make our requests, we also know that he will give us what we ask for." See, I asked God to take away my desire for alcohol. And within a month, he had me on a diet that completely removed it. And when I asked God to remove my desires for this world and replace them with a burning passion for him and his word and his will and his son, he made it all happen within a few short days. Now my life is completely different. And the reason he answered those prayers is because those prayers pleased him. Okay. Proverbs 23 through 26 says, "My son, give me your heart and let your eyes delight in my ways." See, that was something I forgot to mention earlier. With all this joy and the burdens gone and everything, I also began to see God's guiding hand in my daily life, even the small things. And this verse right here is explaining why that was happening. God was revealing himself to me after I gave over my will. Okay, 1 John 7:25 says, "Out of your heart will flow rivers of living water." See, this explains why I felt so new and clean. When I gave my heart over to Jesus, he gave me a new one that could interact with the Holy Spirit, God's Spirit, God's presence. And that's why I felt so new and clean, because I was new and clean. 1 Peter 1:8 through 9 says, "You love him even though you have never seen him. Though you do not see him now, you trust him, and you rejoice with a glorious, inexpressible joy. The reward for trusting him will be the salvation of your souls." This explains the overwhelming joy I feel even if my day's not going well. Matthew 11:20 through 30 says, "Come to me and all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." See, all those years before, I didn't want to give over my will because I thought all of a sudden my life would be restricted. I would have all these rules that I would need to follow, and that my life would essentially become burdened with someone else's will. But that's not the case at all. That's not what happened. Instead, my burdens became lighter because Jesus literally took much of the burden of my life and put it onto his own shoulders. You know, guys, I waited way too long to trust Jesus. Please don't make my mistake. Jesus is very real, and the salvation he offers each and every one of us is very real. If you don't believe me, just ask him. Every morning for a month, just when you wake up, say, "Jesus, are you real? If so, please reveal yourself to me." And read the Bible. Read the Bible. If you really dig into it, you're going to see that he really is the bridge to get us home, to get us back to God in heaven. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, and God bless.